Hi, I'm Emmanuel from Sophos Support, and welcome to part 2 in this two-part video series on the Sophos Transparent Authentication Suite, or STAS. In part 1, you'll learn about the basic STAS network setup, the role of STAS, and how it works. A link to this tech bit is included in the video description. Part 2 will cover the installation and configuration of STAS in Sophos Firewall, as well as in Windows Active Directory and AD Group Policy. It will also cover the setup of STAS in the STA agent and STA collector. For more information on STAS, check out our recommended read linked in the video description. Before we begin, ensure that you have admin rights to access your Active Directory. You'll also need a domain user with permission to read AD Group membership and rights to log on as a service. Sophos Firewall needs to be integrated with Active Directory to work, and groups from your AD should also be imported into your AD. We won't be covering this process in the video, but if you haven't integrated your Sophos Firewall with your AD, a link to the tech bit can be found in the description. To follow along, this setup requires Sophos Firewall version 21 and STAS version 2.5.1. The following demonstration uses Windows Server 2019. Note, a valid base firewall license is required for STAS to function properly. Let's get started with Sophos Firewall configuration. In Sophos Firewall, navigate to Administration. Open the Device Access tab. Under Authentication Services, enable clients in the zones where STAS and user workstations are located. In this case, the Windows Server and workstation are both in the LAN zone. Click Apply, followed by OK. The drop-down menu indicates that the device has successfully been updated. Now, go to Authentication and select the STAS tab. Toggle the switch on to enable STAS and click the Activate STAS button. It's recommended to adjust the default STAS settings for optimal performance and security. The default identity probe timeout period is 120 seconds or 2 minutes. Reduce the timeout to 3 seconds for a faster response. For restrict client traffic during identity probe, set this to no to prevent workstations from being disconnected and traffic restricted during re-authentication. Next, toggle on Enable User Inactivity. This will automatically remove inactive users from the live user list. Click Apply to enable the changes. The next step is to add the STA collector into Sophos Firewall. Click Add New Collector. On this page, enter the IP address of your STA collector, in this case 10.2.0.101. Keep the default port number as 6677, or you collect a port if changed from the default. Click Save to apply the changes. For redundancy, Sophos Firewall supports adding multiple STA collectors to a group. If there are two STA collectors for the same AD domain, they can be placed in the same collector group by selecting Existing Group. Sophos Firewall allows up to 5 collectors in a single group. Click Save to apply the changes. Now, you need to configure the Windows AD Group Policy. Start by configuring the default domain group policy to ensure event ID 4768 is generated whenever a user logs into a workstation. On the ADDC, open Group Policy Management. Right-click on Default Domain Policy and choose Edit. Navigate to Computer Configuration, Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, Local Policies, Audit Policy. Then open Audit Account Logon Events and change the policy setting to Success and Failure. Click Apply to save the changes. Next, go to Advanced Audit Policy Configuration, Audit Policies, Account Logon. Open Audit Kerberos Authentication Service and set audit events to Success and Failure. Finally, go to Logon, Logoff, open Audit Logon, and again set the policy to Success and Failure. Click Apply, followed by OK. This example configures the STA collector to use WMI as the workstation polling method. A firewall rule must be created in the group policy to allow workstations to accept inbound WMI traffic. To create a new rule, in Security Settings, open the folder Windows Defender Firewall with Advanced Security and select Inbound Rules, New Rule. This opens the new Inbound Rule wizard. In Rule Type, select the predefined drop-down menu and set the rule type to WMI. Select Next to continue. In Predefined Rules, only select WMI in and select Next to continue. Finally, in Action, set to allow the connection and select Finish. Now, all workstations within the domain are configured to accept inbound WMI requests. Note RPC, RPC Locator, DCOM, and WMI services should be enabled on workstations for WMI or registry read access. Next, configure a Windows firewall rule to enable traffic between the STA agent and the STA collector, as well as between the STA collector and the Sophos firewall. Start by setting up the firewall rule on all servers where the agent and collector are installed. The agent needs to establish outbound connections on TCP port 5566 and UDP port 50001, and it should accept inbound connections on UDP port 50001. By default, Windows Firewall allows all outbound connections, so no configuration is typically required. However, if outbound connections are blocked by default, you will need to create firewall rules to enable this traffic. To create outbound rules, first open Windows Defender Firewall with Advanced Security. Next, right-click on Outbound Rules and click on New Rule to open the new Outbound Rule wizard. In the Rule Type section, select Port and click Next. Then, in the Protocol and Port section, set specific remote ports to allow TCP port 5566 and click Next to continue. In the Action section, select Allow the connection and click Next. After that, choose where this rule will apply: domain, private, or public, and click Next to continue. Finally, provide a name for the rule and click Finish. Now, create another outbound rule, this time set to allow UDP to port 50001. Both rules now appear in Outbound Rules. Next, create a firewall rule to allow inbound connections to UDP port 50001. Right-click on Inbound Rules, then click on New Rule. Set up the rules to UDP port 50001 and name the new rule. Once finished, the rule will appear in Inbound Rules. Repeat these steps wherever the agent is installed. This completes the Windows Firewall configuration for the STA agent. Next, configure Windows Firewall on the server where the STA collector is installed. The STA collector establishes outbound connections to UDP port 6060 in the Sophos firewall and the UDP port 50001 on the agent. It accepts inbound connections on TCP port 5566, UDP port 6677, and 50001. As previously noted, Windows Firewall allows all outbound connections by default, so no additional configuration should be necessary. However, if the outbound connections are blocked, a firewall rule must be created to allow the outbound traffic. Next, on the Windows server, open Windows Defender Firewall with Advanced Security. Right-click on Outbound Rules, then click on New Rule. Set up the rules to allow UDP port 6060 and 50001 and name the rule. Click Finish to save the rule. Next, create inbound rules to accept connections from the STA agent and the Sophos firewall. Right-click on Inbound Rules, then click on New Rule. Allow inbound connections on TCP port 5566. Name the rule and click Finish. Then create another rule, this time to accept inbound connections on UDP port 6677 and 50001. Once again, name the rule and click Finish. The new rules now appear in the Inbound Rules list. Repeat these steps for wherever the collector is installed. This completes the Windows Firewall configuration for the STA collector. The next step is to install the STA agent on the ADDC. First, download the STAS package from the Sophos Firewall web admin by navigating to Authentication, selecting Client Downloads from the ellipse icon, and choosing the STAS download. Then, log into the domain controller as a member of the AD Domain Admins group and install the STA agent. On the installer file, right-click and select Run as Administrator. This will avoid potential permission issues with Windows. For type of setup, choose STA agent. Then provide the AD Domain Admin account information and password. Although the account doesn't need to be an administrator, it must be a member of the Domain Admins group and have rights to log on as a service. Click Next and then Finish to complete the installation. Now, let's configure the STA agent. Open STAS on the domain controller. In the General tab, use the ellipse icon to enter the NetBIOS name of the AD domain, together with the fully qualified domain name. Note, in STAS, the NetBIOS name must be in capital letters. Click Apply. Then, click Start to launch the agent. After a moment, the current status of STA agent will change from stop to start. If the STA agent cannot be started, double-check the administrator credentials, NetBIOS name, and fully qualified domain name, and that the user has enabled the log on as a service permission. Next, go to the STA agent tab. Set STA agent mode to event log. In this case, the domain controller IP field should remain blank since the STA agent is installed directly on the AD domain controller. Monitor networks is the network address of the AD workstations. In this example, it is 10.2.0.0/24. Under collector list, click Add to add the IP address of our STA collector. 10.2.0.101 is used in this example. Click OK, followed by Yes to save the configuration, and click Apply. This will close STAS. Sometimes the STAS service may fail to start. When this happens, you receive an error message showing a logon failure. But don't worry, there's a quick fix to this. Go to Services. Find Sophos Transparent Authentication Suite. Right-click on it and choose Properties. Go to the Logon tab and enter the AD domain admin account and passwords. Now return to the STA agent. Click the Start button, and now the STA agent should start. If STA agent still cannot be started, please contact Sophos support to fix the problem. With the STA agent installed and configured, the next step is to install the STA collector on the Windows server. Note, installing the collector on the domain controller is not recommended due to the volume of traffic it generates. You can use the same STAS installer file that was used for the STA agent to install the STA collector. First, log into the Windows server as a member of the AD domain admins group. Right-click the installer and select Run as administrator. This time, for the setup type, choose STA collector and click Next. Provide the AD domain admin account info along with the password. Again, it's not necessary to be the administrator, but the account must be a member of the AD domain admins group and have logged on as a service rights. Click Next and finish to complete the installation. Now, configure the STA collector. Open STAS on the Windows server. In the General tab, enter the NetBIOS name of the AD domain as well as the fully qualified domain name. Click Apply and then click on Start to launch the STA agent. Next, go to the STA collector tab. Under Sophos Appliances, enter the internal IP address of your Sophos firewall. In this case, 10.2.0.1, and click OK. For the workstation polling method, use WMI. Enable log-off detection and set the detection method to workstation polling. Make sure the dead entry timeout is set to 0, as any other value will prevent STAS from functioning correctly. Then go to the exclusion list tab. We recommend configuring the logged-in user exclusion list to stop the STA collector from detecting unnecessary usernames, such as those used by background services like antivirus software updaters. In this case, I will add TrendUpD, TrendUpD2, and OKTIA service. You may need to add other usernames depending on the software installed on your workstations. This prevents AD users from being logged off the Sophos firewall when a background service account logs into the workstation. Please note, the logged-in user exclusion list is not case sensitive. In addition, entries must be the username only. Do not include the prefix of the NetBIOS name or the suffix of the domain name. We also need to configure the login IP address or network exclusion list. Since STAS is designed to detect users on workstations and not servers, it's important to filter out any usernames from Windows servers. Click Add to add the IP addresses of any servers, such as Citrix terminal servers, Microsoft RDS servers, DNS servers, or web servers. In this case, enter 10.2.0.102 for the IP addresses of the DNS server and 10.2.0.103 for the web server. Back in the Exclusion List tab, click OK, followed by Yes to save the configuration, and click Apply. This will close STAS. Then launch STAS again. Returning to the General tab, notice that the IP address of the Sophos firewall is listed as a served Sophos appliance. This indicates that the STA collector has successfully established communication with Sophos firewall. Now, create a firewall rule to grant the AD group access to the WAN zone. Since rules can differ between environments, refer to the video description for a link to creating rules. In my case, I name my rule LAN _STAS and place the rule at the top. I add it to the source zone as LAN and destination zone as WAN. For match known users, I select community and mark it in under user or groups. When creating a firewall rule, ensure that use web authentication for unknown users is disabled, allowing SDAS to detect users through logon type 1. If this option is enabled, web authentication will occur if Sophos firewall fails to detect a live user on the workstation. Click Save to add the firewall rule. Now that SDAS is installed and configured, verify its functionality by logging off the workstation and then logging back in. Go to the STA collector in SDAS, navigate to Advanced, and select Show Live Users. This will display the live users detected by the STA collector. Live users can also be viewed in the Sophos Firewall web admin under Current Activities, Live Users. With that, the SDAS installation and configuration is complete. I hope you found this video series useful. Check out the documentation for this video in the video description. For further assistance, view and post questions on community.sophos.com. And go to techbits.sophos.com for more great videos like this one. Thanks for watching.